as Khabar mentioned, my name is Sameena Nazir and I am founder and director of Potohar Organization for Development Advocacy. Short abbreviation is PODA. और हम 2003 से पोठोहार के इलाके में, जो कि एक बारानी इलाका है, वहाँ पे किसान कम्युनिटीज़ की ख़ास तौर पे औरतों के इश्यूज़ को हाईलाइट कर रहे हैं। और उसमें हमारी एक कैंपेन ये भी थी कि 15 अक्टूबर जो पूरी दुनिया में देहात की औरत के आलमी दिन के तौर पे मनाया जाता है, उसको पाकिस्तान में भी तस्लीम किया जाए। और 2 साल की लगातार कोशिश के बाद और गवर्नमेंट ऑफ पाकिस्तान ख़ास तौर पे ऑफिस ऑफ शहनाज वज़ीर अली और NCSW और बहुत से दोस्तों की सपोर्ट की वजह से आई एम हैप्पी टू रिपोर्ट कि 15 अक्टूबर अब पाकिस्तान में भी देहात की औरत का आलमी कौमी दिन है। और इस साल आई होप कि हम सब उस दिन को रिकग्नाइज करेंगे और उस दिन को एज अ टूल इस्तेमाल करेंगे टू हाईलाइट द इश्यूज ऑफ रूरल वुमेन, टू ब्रिंग देयर वॉइसेस, to bring visibility to their issues and to demand solutions and rights and opportunities for rural women. As you know, the topic of this session is very broad and I just have 10 minutes to share with you my thoughts on climate change, food security, livelihoods, women, international and national implications. So I thought, with your permission, that I'll share with you my understanding of climate change and how it affects women, and then close by sharing with you some step forward. Although climate change is a reality today, most of us are not fully cognizant of its impact in our day-to-day lives. Broadly speaking, climate change can be felt in 2 ways. First, short-term climate change becomes visible when we have hurricanes, floods, drought, hazardous, erratic rain patterns, landslides, or drought or other natural disaster. Secondly, the long-term impact of climate change is more gradual degradation of our environment and its impact on our food, livelihood, and environment. Another important aspect to remember about climate change is that it is not only energy efficiency or industrial carbon emissions, it is also about people. What and where and how they live, what food they consume and what food choices they have, people's rights and opportunities, and their ability to have food security and sustainable livelihoods. The future of global security and food security is highly dependent on 2 important and interrelated factors. First is the degree to which the developing countries will succeed in raising agricultural productivity through effective and sustainable natural resource management. And second, to the extent the world will succeed in mitigating climate change, especially through more responsible role of developed countries and more help to developing countries. The issue of global food security should also be examined with the current population growth and its accompanying projected population in the world. If the world population growth continues on the same speed, the world population is projected to grow from 6.8 billion to 9.1 billion by 2050. Most of this growth is projected in developing countries and most is projected in Asia, and Pakistan is one of the top 5 countries. Linked with that is the projection that some of the adverse climate changes are expected in the Eastern and South Asian countries, with more demand for food and more pressure on water resources. In Southern Africa, for example, agriculture productivity in rain-fed areas is expected to fall by 50%. Majority of our food in this world is produced by smallholder farmers. Helping and empowering small farmers, especially women farmers, will be critical to ensure food security for all of us. In Pakistan, the issue of food security is not just linked with agricultural growth and production, it is also linked with distribution issues and the purchasing power of people. The crisis of wheat distribution last year, when we had a bumper wheat crop, where several women were killed trying to get atta in Karachi, is a frightening example of what might happen if food security is not ensured to poor people of this country. Agriculture and related fields such as fisheries, handicraft, especially those things made from the raw materials of agricultural products, are most affected by climate change. And all segments of population are affected, but women are particularly affected because women are most hit by climate change. Women are mostly affected because they make up the large share of agricultural workforce, and they are also the ones who take care of the land and the animals in most countries. So they bear the brunt of climate change, especially poor women who are more dependent on land and natural resources. Women's groups from around the world have collected various examples on how women's lives, food security and livelihoods are most affected by climate change. And these examples show that there are three major ways that women are affected by climate change. First, rural women have fewer assets to sell when harvests collapse, either because of flood or drought or because of less resources they control and own. And I'd like to share with you the example that we are currently dealing with in Potohar. As you all know, that this year बारिशें बहुत कम हुई हैं पोटोहार में, सारे मुल्क में ही कम हुई हैं, लेकिन पोटोहार में particularly कम हुई हैं. तो एक तो कम हुई है, दूसरी लेट हुई है, तो उसकी वजह से 80% जो गंदम की फसल है, जो कि हमारी मेन क्रॉप है विंटर की, वो बुरी तरह अफेक्टेड है. और अभी पूरी कटाई हुई नहीं है और हमें उसका इम्पैक्ट ऑलरेडी नजर आ रहा है. सबसे पहले तो जो जानवरों के लिए चारा मिलता था वो बिल्कुल खत्म हो गया है. इस वक्त चारा जो है वो गंदम से महंगा बिक रहा है पोटोहार में. दूसरा ये है कि लोगों के जानवर मर रहे हैं और जो उनका ये भी एक एसेट होता है, वो उसको बचाने के चक्कर में उसको सस्ती कीमतों पे बेच रहे हैं कि मरने से बेहतर है हम इनको बेच दें. उसका इम्पैक्ट उनके घर की फूड पे पड़ रहा है. पहले थोड़ा बहुत मिल्क दही कुछ मिल जाता था, अब वो भी नहीं मिल रहा. औरतों को उससे भी कम मिलेगा, बच्चों को उससे भी कम मिलेगा. तो इसका डायरेक्ट असर जो है वो प्रेग्नेंट औरतों पे और बच्चों पे हो रहा है. और हमने एक सर्वे किया है जिसमें हमने ये इस्टेब्लिश किया है कि चकवाल, जेलम, अटक, मियाँवाली एंड पार्ट्स ऑफ बरानी, रावलपिंडी 80% गंदम की जो फसल है वो खराब हो चुकी है, तबाह हो चुकी है. और हम हुकूमत से अपील करते हैं कि इस एरिया को डिज़ास्टर हिट एरिया करार दिया जाए ताकि इन औरतों को, ख़ास तौर पे जो गरीब औरतें हैं, उन्हें रिलीफ फराहम किया जाए. तो ये एक बहुत ही कॉन्क्रीट एग्जांपल है हाउ क्लाइमेट चेंज इज अफेक्टिंग आवर लाइव्स हियर इन पाकिस्तान. So going back to the three ways that climate change affects women the most, secondly, women more than men fall into chronic indebtedness related to climate-induced crop failures because microcredit is largely targeted at women, and as managers of production and household expenses, they are under stronger pressures to bridge resource gaps. And thirdly, during food shortages, it is usually the mother who gives up her share of food for her children and even for her husband, as I just gave you the example. The other bigger threats of climate change, particularly in developing countries, are large corporate mining. And that has extremely harmful long-term impact on mining people and their environment, such as deforestation that affects the habitat, especially the endangered species, water system, ecosystem, mangroves in the area where mining is taking place. Open mine pits that affect water reservoir, water depletion, and water contamination with chemicals that are used for mining, and corporate logging that affects forest depletion. Finally, in conclusion, I'd like to close by saying that as survivors and fighters and defenders of environment, women, especially rural women, are also the best strategists to mitigate the dangerous impact of climate changes. Rural women have developed crops, diversification, multiple cropping and intercropping practices, cultivation of appropriate crops which are resistant to flood and drought, and organic agriculture that is safe and sustainable. In addition to cropping and survival strategies, rural women all over the world have displayed organized struggles and strength to prevent extractive industries such as mining and logging. And we have a great example of the Chipko movement from India, where women tied themselves to the trees to protect the forest and their livelihoods. Women also continue to build their capacities, and their voices must be included in the 4 Ds of climate change. And these, I just made up these Ds. And there are discussions, debates, deliberations, and decisions about climate change issues in Pakistan and everywhere, and about the problems of food security, climate change, livelihood, and national and international implications. Giving them land and ownership of their resources so they can grow their own food and ensure food security for their families and communities. It is a pity and a challenge that the women's rights voices were not really visible at the Copenhagen Conference on Climate Change. We all need to revisit and tell the whole world the words of women environmentalist Nobel Peace Prize laureate Wangari Maathai from Kenya, that there is unlikely to be climate equity without gender equity. Thank you.